Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Empowering Your Network Operations Team in the Hybrid Infrastructure Era. Before we dive into today's presentation, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have a question at any point during the event, please submit it in the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will address your questions throughout the conversation and at the end of the presentation. Also, the recorded version of today's presentation will be available following the event. Please look for an email from the Kentik team to rewatch and share the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's speakers. Shamus McGillicuddy, Vice President of Research at EMA, and Dan Rohan, Product Manager at Kentik. Okay, with that said, Shamus, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And just by further way of introduction, I just want to just briefly describe Enterprise Management Associates, also known as EMA. We're an industry analyst firm. We interview and survey thousands of IT decision makers annually to help gain an understanding of what's happening in the IT industry, not just networking, but security, application development, DevOps, everything. We were founded in 1996. We have about 9 analysts focused on the IT management space in particular. We're headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. And I'll turn it over to Dan to give an introduction to Kentik.
Thanks, Shamus. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan. I'll just introduce Kentik real quick. Kentik is a network monitoring and intelligence company. We were founded in San Francisco around 2014. We focus largely on customer experience monitoring, edge, WAN, data center optimization, health, and performance. We work with a large variety of different customer bases, service providers, content providers, digital enterprises. And you can find out more about us at www.kentik.com.
Great. For today's agenda, we'll be covering the following topics. A lot of the insights in the slides are drawn from research I've done over the last year or so, market surveys and interviews with IT professionals. So I'll be speaking to that on my slides. The agenda itself begins by looking at why network operations professionals have to adapt to digital transformation today. Some of you may know why already, but I'll be reviewing that a little bit. Then we'll talk about some of the requirements that you will be dealing with as you adapt to digital transformation, beginning with hybrid visibility requirements being essential, a drive towards cross-domain operations to protect application performance, and just the general drive to find ways to consolidate your network operations tools. And then we'll close that out with some Q&A.
I thought I would start by highlighting just a few things that Shamus is going to go into depth on. You're going to hear him talk about how network teams can be either successful or unsuccessful, depending largely on how those teams are structured and how they've employed different monitoring strategies. And it's my point of view, and to Kentik's point of view, that because NetOps teams sit between the services that talk to each other and the users that are actually consuming those services, those teams are in a really privileged position. And if they have their monitoring set up right, NetOps teams can actually add a lot of value to their organizations as kind of a fair arbiter that gets teams talking to each other and using network data to find root causes. But on the flip side of the coin, it can also mean that if the team isn't set up properly, with visibility into the right environments, they can actually be perceived as slowing things down. So, we believe that whenever you're operating a hybrid network, you absolutely need visibility of the entire environment in order to add value that really only network data can provide. And we also think it's especially important in today's cloud-native ecosystem. We know that a large number of our customers are shifting away from monolithic applications towards, cloud-native, containerized microservices approaches. And so with all this good comes new challenges. Services are ephemeral, and schedulers like Kubernetes, et cetera, introduce layers of visualization blind spots that we need to overcome. And when your hybrid environment includes operating your own data centers in addition to public clouds, which is, by the way, a trend that we see increasing from our neck of the woods, you've got a whole new set of problems. These environments are increasingly architected to behave like clouds, but while the end users can pretend that capacity and compute are unlimited, the network teams know that that's not the case. And you still need to be able to visualize how services are consuming it, so you can kind of plan for the expansion of those environments. And lastly, we can't forget that hybrid means much more than just your on-prem and your cloud. It also means the internet. And I know that Shamus is going to spend some time talking about how the internet plays a role in hybrid strategies. And we know from talking to our users that if they instrument their monitoring to ignore the internet and the SaaS and the PaaS services that are consumed on it, then when those services start to break down and impact their own services, then they've missed the opportunity to add value. So with that kind of preamble, I'll turn it back over to Shamus, and we can definitely hear more about what he's learned through his research.
All right. Thanks, Dan. So moving on to NetOps and the need to adapt to digital transformation. Just to set the stage here, my research has shown that enterprise network operation teams are very cognizant of the need to deal with digital transformation. And we think that digital transformation is driving like a next generation approach to network operations. In our most recent survey of general network management strategies in the enterprise space, 1/3 of network managers, that's I think about 350, 1/3 of 350 network managers, told us that their strategies around network management and network monitoring is highly driven by digital transformation initiatives. And when you looked at just the network managers who said they were successful with their network operations efforts, it was higher. It was 42%. So those successful organizations were more likely to say that they're building their network management strategy around a digital transformation initiative of some kind. And then when we asked them separately from that, how they measure their success, we were seeing indicators of that awareness. For instance, when in digital transformation, applications become the business. The applications are revenue generators. They are business process enablers. They are transaction enablers. They are the connection to your customers more often than they used to be. And so the health and performance of those applications and the experience people have of those applications become critical things for the network team to think about. And so when we ask network managers to tell us, how do you measure your own success, or how does your organization measure your success as a network operations team? They were 2 times more likely to say it was something like overall service quality or overall user experience on the network than they were to say just simple uptime. So it's not about like, are your interfaces up or down, or your links up and down. It's more like, how are people experiencing things on the network?
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. Make sure I'm off mute. To me, this is a major shift from the way that the network teams used to work. Back in the day of siloed network teams, you had the NOC and the engineering and architects, and maybe the architects, if you were lucky, really understood the mission of the businesses, the services that they ran. Well, as in this paradigm, the network engineers themselves, kind of simply see themselves as providing the plumbing for the applications, but in this new, more application-aware paradigm, digital transformation, the network teams can step up and leverage their expertise to improve that service quality, by proactively measuring across the entire environment and understanding the end user experience. And so we see network teams that are moving from that, interfaces down or up model to, proactively discovering which applications are dragging large amounts of bandwidth back and forth across the data center fabric or their interconnects, and working with service owners to consolidate these services to save money and on bandwidth and devices.
Right. Yeah, totally agree with that. So my opinion is that network operations teams need to take control of the challenges that impact digital transformation, and some of those challenges that from the network operations side of things are outside of their control. For instance, when we asked enterprises this year what are their top challenges to network operations success, their big 3 were lack of budget, lack of skilled personnel, and failed infrastructure implementation. So they don't have the budget to change their approach, to update, modernize, or expand, or improve their network operations tools. They lack the skilled personnel to support that. that transformation. Or some of the transformational projects like an SD-WAN implementation or a multi-cloud network architecture was not implemented properly. And so then a lot of heavy lifting falls to the network operations team to like keep services afloat, even if the transformational project was not fully successful. So you need to advocate for those three things when you see a digital transformation initiative coming your way. You got to be in a position to say, I think we're going to need budget to support our transformation on the network operations side of things. Like, we don't have the tools to support this. We also don't have the skills in-house. We either need to hire people or train people to deal with whatever changes you're bringing to transform the business. And also, as a person focused on operations and managing hybrid infrastructure, I need to be able to be a part of the implementation to make sure that I don't, so I can help make sure that the thing that's going to be handed to me to keep up and running is done properly. On the other side of things, when we asked people, when we looked at how the most successful network operations teams are challenged most, they were more likely to say, yes, we a successful network operations team, we see challenges too, but we are more likely to see challenges around cross-domain collaboration and fragmented tools. So that tells you that they're being pushed to go from like that siloed NOC to a cross-domain team, and they're trying to figure out how to do that successfully. They're also recognizing the fact that, yes, now we have a lot of tools we need to rationalize, consolidate, integrate. We have the budget, we have the skilled people to do it. Now we just have to figure out how to do it best.
I would say these bullet points are absolutely spot on. I was just at a customer site right before COVID hit, and I was chatting with a guy who was complaining that his budget was completely thinned out over the years because his team had cobbled together a collection of tools that didn't keep pace with the rate of change of his very commercialized network, and that caused some downstream effects as well. When that gentleman hired staff, he saw ramp up periods of several months or more, and a lot of that time was spent waiting for the new hire to learn the network, and then some of it was also spent learning the tools that they needed to know before they could figure out what caused a spike or what IP a service was talking to. And so that's all a real problem. When the network is the common fabric that allows applications to that are run by different teams to talk with each other, the team that runs the network in a sense is sort of the counselor or the broker. And if they don't have their tools set up in such a way that one team can see what another team is seeing, then they can't leverage that middle position to bring value to the entire org.
Great. Okay. So let's move on to the next section on, why is hybrid visibility essential for network operations in the digital transformation? Before we do that, though, we want to ask this question of you guys. Poll the audience on, whether or not you feel that you have a hybrid network infrastructure. And so we'll give you about 30 seconds to answer that question. And in terms of what is a hybrid network infrastructure, it can be, as we've talked about, alluded to already, it could be a mix of MPLS and internet. It can be a mix of on-prem infrastructure in your data center combined with a hybrid or multi-cloud architecture. Basically, you're managing a network where the boundaries have changed a lot. You got a lot of different pieces that you're being asked to incorporate in your overall estate that you would describe as a network, and have to adapt your network operations tools and processes to support that. Okay, so looks like most of you have a hybrid network that you're dealing with at this point. It's good to know. So coming off of that, my research has shown that hybrid networks are becoming the norm. Technology initiatives that are most influential on network strategies right now, the top two are Internet of Things, which kind of hybridizes and hybridizes the network edge and introduces a lot of device diversity. You might also force some connectivity diversity at the edge. You might be using more 4G, 5G, for instance, to connect some things. You might be introducing private 5G in the future, using Wi-Fi in new places. There's 43% say that they're really driven by public cloud and multi-cloud architecture now. So those are network management strategies being driven by the cloud. SaaS applications are also a pretty big driver. 30% say they're really driven by WAN transformation right now, which means adopting software-defined WAN and introducing a lot of internet to your overall wide area network. And 27% are already starting to think a lot about how they're going to implement something like the Secure Access Service Edge, also known as SASE, which is kind of a hybrid technology in itself that combines software-defined WAN, remote secure access, and cloud-delivered security capabilities like firewall as a service and CASB and secure web gateway and stuff like that. So those are all indicators that today's network managers are really being forced to build strategies around the technologies that comprise a hybrid network.
Yeah, this is all backed up what we're seeing coming from our field teams as well. I think around 2/3 of Kentik customers are hybrid in some capacity or another, and have gotten there via various avenues, either accidental or planned. Of those that aren't, we know that they are planning to move into that for all the reasons that you just mentioned. When we talk with them, most of these are operating hybrid, because they either made the decision early on to embrace the cloud fully and then backed off to a hybrid position in order to fulfill a strategic goal that the cloud could fill, or those that started off partially hybrid from the very beginning, as either a single line of business moved into the cloud or that department moved while centralized IT maintained the status quo. Luckily, we are hearing less and less of the story that we also heard early on, where customers were hybrid almost by accident because someone had built a rogue environment. Organizations are getting better at detecting this using their monitoring tools and squashing those environments and kind of bringing them into a more managed, environment.
Well, that's good to hear, because that was something a lot of people were struggling with a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to hybrid visibility, I think that one of the starting points is to make sure that you have cloud visibility. We found this year in our research that this has become a pretty high priority. When we asked enterprises to tell us what kinds of data sources were important for certain network management use cases, such as operational monitoring, network troubleshooting, and network capacity planning, cloud flow logs like AWS VPC flow logs were at the top of the list. That tells us that's really top of mind for them right now. They're looking to get that cloud visibility right now. It was more important. It was hotter than things like regular old NetFlow or device metrics via SNMP polling, mids and traps, packets and packet metadata. Like cloud flow logs are really important to people right now. Also, in our last research, looking specifically at the network performance management and diagnostics industry, insights in the public cloud was one of the most important. Cloud flow logs was identified as one of the most important data sources for insights into the cloud for users of NPM tools. And we've also found that network operations teams that consider themselves successful are 3 times more likely to have tools with excellent support and visibility into the public cloud. So whether you've got your tools in place today, or whether you're looking to modernize your tools for digital initiative, you really need to make sure that you have a solution that gives you that visibility into the cloud right away.
Yeah, I would just add on to that if your organization is running networks and cloud environments and you don't have visibility in the cloud, you have to ask yourself which side of the coin you're on. Are you successful or unsuccessful? Because is your network just mining the plumbing and making sure that circuits aren't congested, or are you meeting the service owners halfway and leveraging that position as the team that sees all the bits and bytes to help reduce MTTRs? And speaking of cloud flow logs, more so than any other data source, can give you that visibility that leverages that position. They give you that connection level detail that you can use for needle in the haystack forensic investigations. You can go really deep with them. You can, if you run managed Kubernetes services and Google, Azure, AWS, and soon even IBM, they all supporting, exporting flow logs from those clusters, and that can help you see how your nodes are communicating. And some flow log vendors like Google even offer GKE annotations to their flow logs that give you that pod-to-pod visibility, so you can actually see inside your apps, which is sort of a new challenge and an exciting opportunity for network teams to add value to the service owners and their customers. And if you also use the cloud for your network edge, then you can use Cloudflare logs to understand where your customers are coming from, what regions are handling that load. And just like in your traditional data center, there's a ton of value in aggregating these Cloudflare logs together, because aggregating these flow logs can help you understand the interior of your VPC or your VNet architecture. So what I mean by that is this: like many organized or many people find themselves using traditional network constructs like peering in order to enable their cloud infrastructure to scale. So you might set up a VPC for day one, and then by year 3, you might have 5 or 50 or 100 VPCs to manage, and each has their own network space, their own routing rules, access policies, and services inside them. So over time, you inevitably start to build a structure. Maybe if you're lucky enough to start with a structure, you won't have to build it, but most people have to kind of cobble this together into a structure. And so we see them enabling direct VPC to VPC peering, or maybe more, cloudy constructs like AWS or Azure Private Link to enable connectivity to your customers, or a transit gateway to centralize policies, et cetera. And so when you implement Cloudflare logs, this gives your networking team access to all of these constructs, so you can see which apps are hogging your direct connects, which applications have a dependency over a private peering link between VPCs, which apps should be using a cost-saving or privacy-protecting services like a peering connection, but instead are going over the public internet and maybe costing you a ton. Another thing to know about the VPC flow logs, and I'll stop harping on them for a while, is that, every vendor does them slightly differently and adds a bit of benefit. So I love Google annotates their flow logs with application latency, and this gives users, an immediate at a glance benefit of application performance. And then AWS recently added TCP flags and packet source and destination IPs, so you can troubleshoot your TCP connectivity, as well as digging even deeper into the outer header, past the outer header, in case if you've got some kind of tunneling happening inside of your VPCs. And then both Azure and AWS provide firewall policy action, so it's super easy to just turn these flow logs on and see, when you're migrating apps, which apps need to have their policies updated, or which parts of your app are being targeted by attackers. And the last thing I'll mention before I go on, is that Cloudflare logs, just like regular NetFlow, they can get you pervasive and complete visibility across the entire org in just a few minutes. Whereas, other solutions like agents can be a real pain. They add load to the compute, and you have to go through security compliance checks often. And then, packet captures, which are wonderful. Some cloud vendors are supporting packet captures now, but we're hearing that these are very cost prohibitive. Excuse me. So, they can be deployed by most organizations at sort of a macro, always on scale, but you're going to pay for that. Flow logs have that middle or the ground approach that really maximizes the number of critical use cases without really breaking the bank.
Yeah, it's kind of analogous to the traditional network too. Flows like NetFlow are less expensive to monitor than a global view of packets on your network. Mm-hmm. Another piece of the hybrid network to think about might be IoT. A lot of enterprises have IoT devices connecting to their corporate networks now that can introduce new visibility, monitoring requirements, and management requirements to network operations and network engineering. 45% of network operations professionals told us this year that when they had to buy new network monitoring tools when IoT devices started connecting to their network. Why might that be? Well, we asked them what kinds of responsibilities they have around IoT. The top 2 are IoT security. A lot of them are at least partially responsible for IoT security, and connectivity obviously is the other one. They might have to introduce new connectivity to the network. Maybe they've determined they need to deploy private 5G, or maybe they're expanding their Wi-Fi network into new areas of the enterprise, or maybe they have new WAN connectivity requirements. There's some some operational technology outside of their traditional corporate sites that they need to connect. 42% say they have a lot of responsibility around IoT application health and performance, which is no surprise. They have that responsibility for all business applications usually. And 40% said they also have some responsibility for IoT device health and performance, which kind of expands the domain that they have to worry about with their monitoring tools. And 39% said they have at least partial responsibility for IoT device administration, like patching and updating operating systems, which, that's a whole can of worms I don't recommend them getting involved in, but it looks like they're being pulled in that direction. And then also, we alluded to this already, the internet is the new wide area network. Most enterprises are introducing internet connectivity into their overall WAN architecture at this point. Whether they're getting rid of something like MPLS or not, they're looking to the internet to supplement or their bandwidth capability to connect into the cloud. The drivers of that use of internet, cloud connectivity is a big piece of it. Infrastructure as a service, PaaS, SaaS, all that. The internet is a very good on-ramp into cloud services, and in some cases the only way to get into cloud services. But also, software-defined WAN has enabled hybrid connectivity. There's cost savings there if you're leaning on the internet more. There's some flexibility there. There's more bandwidth available in a lot of areas. If you have high bandwidth requirements, the internet has a lot more space on the wire than some MPLS connections in a lot of geographies. And then there's just right now the pandemic. There's been this surge in work from home populations, and those people are using their private ISPs, their personal home ISP connections to get into the corporate networks, and that opens a whole can of worms. There are a lot of metrics that we've seen in our research that people are trying to measure or monitor to understand how the internet is performing. These are some of the ones we see, end-to-end loss latency and jitter across paths, or hop-by-hop loss latency and jitter across those paths. Those are both very popular. That might be through synthetic monitoring. Internet and ISP outage reports are of some value. BGP routing changes and BGP data in general, very valuable to a lot of people. Content delivery network edge availability and response times might be of use to some of these people, depending on how they use CDN technology and services. And then DNS availability and resolution time are of value to a lot of people these days as well.
Yeah, the advent of SD-WAN and software as a service and platforms as a service, it's all good, but of course, with new things come challenges. And so we've been talking with a lot of customers that have, for the longest time, operated their network as somewhat of a static enterprise. They just get their connection to the internet, and then they don't worry about it. They worry mostly about what's happening internally, or maybe over their WAN or in their data center. We're seeing a bit more interest now with some of these, customers that have to meet their work from home requirements, to start to say, okay, well, X percentage of my employees are behind this particular ISP. How can I, get a peering connection, or should I get, should I purchase connectivity from that ISP directly so that we can get, a better experience for those employees, or can we, engineer the traffic to that ISP? So the internet has just exploded in terms of its importance for today's distributed enterprise, and it's only going to continue to be more important as we kind of settle into this new normal.
So cross-domain operations protects application performance. That's the next section I want to talk about, just the value of getting out of the isolated siloed NOC and integrating with other domains in your IT organization. And one of the arguments for that is that service trouble can come from anywhere. It's not always the network. You're told it's the network, and your job is often to prove it isn't the network, maybe you don't have that point the finger at someone else mentality. Maybe you're already in a cross-domain frame of mind, and you're ready to work with your compatriots and other silos to solve the problem. But the bottom line is the network is not the only root cause of complex issues that you need to solve for your business in a digital enterprise. When we asked network managers this year to think of the 3 most recent complex service problems that required cross-domain collaboration to solve, we asked them to name the root causes of those 3 most recent problems. And yes, network infrastructure was at the top, less than half of those issues. End clients system problems or user error was a significant issue that caused a lot of these complex issues. Security systems, with a firewall with a bad policy blocking legitimate traffic, or intrusion prevention device that's being overrun by a surge in traffic, and it's dropping connections. Security incidents is another frequent one. An attack, a DDoS attack on your network is blocking legitimate traffic out, crowding legitimate traffic out, or maybe there's an infection in your network that's propagating, and that propagation is causing congestion. Another big one, server systems. So basically, if you're isolated in the NOC and you're just looking at things from the networking perspective, you're often troubleshooting things that are outside your domain. You might not see them clearly until you've spent a lot of time sort of deducing. You're seeing shadows in your tools that may indicate that, oh, you know what, this is not the network, but it looks like it's coming from the server, or this is a traffic pattern that tells me it's a security incident. It would be better if you had tools and collaborative workflows with other groups to help you understand that problem more quickly and definitively. That's an argument for cross-domain operations. So we're finding that cross-domain operations is becoming more of the norm. Only 17% of enterprises that we surveyed this year told us that they had a standalone network operations center. And those NOCs, they are essential centers of excellence for managing, monitoring, troubleshooting the network, and keeping network services up and running. And they have best practices and established processes in place. They may, the IT service management team may have defined a lot of stuff for them to make sure that they know how to do their job. But they're often siloed from the other domains, even network engineering in a lot of cases, and that limits their ability to collaborate and understand services end to end. I remember talking to a network engineer at an enterprise once who told me that his company had 75 different tools for monitoring and troubleshooting his network. And one of the reasons for that was that he was in the network engineering team, and he had like 4 or 5 tools for monitoring and troubleshooting. But then a NOC had like a different set of tools, and they wanted him to work in their tool to answer, to provide answers to their questions when they needed a tier 3 support. It was a very disconnected, siloed operation, even if within the networking domain. Fortunately, we're seeing right now the number one approach to network operations right now is one in which the NOC is no longer siloed, but the function is integrated into a cross-domain operations center, which means they have full stack monitoring and management of application services, and they have tools and processes in place for collaborative workflows. And we think that's essential to be able to work with other people in other silos together to solve problems rather than pointing fingers. Because when you have all these people integrated in a cross-domain operation, there's no setup anymore. Whenever there's a problem, you don't have to bring a war room together. The war room is always there fighting the battle. You don't need to bring all the constituents together every time there's a problem. They're already in the same room. They already know each other. They already know how to work together, and everything just you've streamlined operations from top to bottom when you do that.
Yeah, I would totally second that. We've talked with tons of teams that are either in that siloed model or in the integrated model or somewhere in between, moving towards the integrated model. And, in the end, the problems are the same. It's still the same DevOps or security or engineering problems with the network right in the middle of it. The question is how quickly are you going to be able to construct that team, and do you have the same data to operate off of a common understanding? So that doesn't really, no matter which model you're in, it doesn't really need to change, or it doesn't really change the kind of tooling that you need. But it certainly helps in terms of reducing MTTRs if you can move to that flat model. Um, and regarding the number of tools, when you try to cover all different use cases with 10 or 20, however many tools you have, you also have that many number of single points of failure, that many numbers, 10 different, for example, domains of expertise that you need to gear your infrastructure staff up on. So, it is really good to consolidate both in terms of the team and in terms of the tools.
Yeah, totally. All right, so and that's a perfect segue into the idea of consolidating network operations tools. Before we continue, we've got one more poll for the people on the line. We want to know how many network monitoring tools your organization has. And the poll should be up right now. I find that this tends to be all over the place, and it's not necessarily a worst practice to have a lot of tools, because sometimes you just can't avoid it. But it definitely, I mean, like I said, that we talked to that one company that had 75 tools. So there we go, kind of all over the place. It looks like a lot of you are in the category of 1 to 3 tools, but there's a significant portion that have 4 to 6, and a couple of you have more than 11 or more. So that's a lot. We find that for years, network operations teams have tried but failed to fully consolidate tools. It's an aspiration, but not a reality. It's the number one procurement strategy for network management tools to look for unified multifunction platforms. That's the most popular one. And 35% of all enterprises do that. There's another significant portion that prefer like a tightly integrated suite of best of suite tools. Like they go to a vendor that has like 4 or 5 tools and it's all integrated together. And then there's like those mavericks out there that just want best of breed everything with limited integration between them. I want this tool from this vendor, this tool from that vendor. Before you know it, you got 11, 15, 20 tools. But the number one strategy is that multifunction platform that can do more than one thing in your NOC or your cross-domain operations center. However, the typical network operations team has 4 to 10 monitoring tools in our research. So that's a persistent thing that's not going away despite that procurement strategy. And 1 out of 5 network operations teams have told us consistently for years that tool fragmentation is a significant disruption to their overall approach to network operations. So there is a need to consolidate where possible.
Yeah. That same customer I visited right before we went to lockdown. We were walking through his NOC, and he had 3 different NPM tools just up on their NOC screen. And he mentioned that, this one's for traffic, this one's for health, this one's for performance, and off screen, of course, he mentioned we've had packet captures, distributed tracing, SIMs, metrics aggregators, and so on and so forth. And, the problem that he was, kind of sharing with me is that it takes months for the employees to get up to speed on these new tools, and they have different support for SSO and auth. So some new engineers might not even have access to the different tools that they need until after an incident occurs, and then they realize, like, hey, I need access to the synthetics monitoring tool so I can set up a test to make sure that this failure scenario doesn't happen again. So if you do have access to all the tools, then you might have a different situation happen where you're troubleshooting for performance. Maybe you got an alert from your synthetics monitoring platform that latency's up, but then you need to go gather the facts. Like, are the traffic levels high or low? Is there an impact on traffic? And if it is high, where is that traffic coming from? And so in order to get those answers, you need the flow logs or something that's going to help you have that insight into the traffic. And then you might need to go determine if there are any network health issues on the infrastructure that were delivering the traffic that might be, increasing that latency. So then you'd log into your mapping tool to find the path, and then you'd log into your NMS to find the health. And, assuming that you're lucky to have all of these these problems kind of hang on long enough to actually get through this whole rigmarole, and you have all of this data there, you can usually resolve. But from my experience, this isn't the norm. More often than not, you might have to wait for the problem to occur over and over again, and your customers and service owners build up a head of steam while you go through this process. So if you can also find tools that collect data historically that allow you to resolve last week's problem today, or continue to crack away at the problems that happen even after they're no longer impacting performance, then you really got a leg up.
Yeah, I've been in a knock where they had like a big on the biggest screen. There's a tool that's showing them like a map of all their sites and the technical staff, and there's like, oh, we don't use that tool. That's just on the screen. So when the CIO comes in, he can see it and be like,
it looks pretty.
Yeah. So it's like they got a tool for that, It's crazy. So there are a lot of challenges associated with fragmented tools. I could go on for a long time about it because I've done a lot of research on this, but let's just leave it at this. Like 96% of enterprises have told me in my research they have more than one network performance management diagnostics tool, and only 49% of them are fully successful at correlating insights across those tools. That's a problem. Here are a couple of quotes from people I've talked to in the last year. There was a senior consultant at a North American IT operations consultancy who specialized in supporting the selection, installation, and operationalization of network operations tools. And he told me that the enterprises he works with typically don't have processes for correlating insights across tools at all. They're basically just being like, I'm looking at one event at a time, I'm assessing that event, and a lot of times it's like, we didn't get an event at all. Why wasn't there an event in our tool? I talked to another guy who said that he uses he uses one tool, but if this is on the screen, but he uses one tool primarily, and if he doesn't get the answer from that tool, then he asks his MPLS provider to figure things out. So great. Another principal tool engineer who works for a North American government agency that is populated mostly by technical staff said that his organization struggles with correlation across his multiple tools, and they usually rely on the experience of the engineers, their knowledge and expertise to do that correlation in their head, human middleware, basically, which means if those people leave or are unavailable or stretched thin, then your whole approach to operations is going to break down. He said that he had attempted to integrate his tools into a manager of managers, but he found that was just pushing a lot of manual work down the chain into his CMDB solution that would be integrated on the back end of that manager of managers, and so they abandoned the project. I'm not arguing that you get down to one tool or two tools or even three tools. I'm just saying that look for tools that can. One thing not on the screen. If you're relying on a lot of free tools, open source tools, things with very limited, narrow capabilities, look for commercial solutions that can consolidate a lot of those requirements. But another thing on this screen is to find tools that can correlate multiple sources of data, not just one or two, even two sources of data, but maybe three or more. There are a lot of tools that can do that. 98% of enterprises said they have at least one network performance management diagnostics tool that can correlate insights from more than one class of network data. That might be flows, whether it's NetFlow, IPFix, or Cloudflow logs. It might be synthetic traffic. It might be BGP data, SNMP MIBs and traps for device metrics, API integration with your infrastructure, logs, packets, both raw packets, maybe just packet metadata. If you can correlate multiple sources of data, you're going to, 50% of the enterprises that have a tool that can correlate multiple sources of data told us that was critical to their success in network operations. And 93% of them said that it gives them better insight into application performance. So it's definitely something you want to look for. Get away from the point tools that consume one or two classes of data. Look for something that can correlate multiple sources of data. This is where Dan will tell us a little bit about how Kentik approaches that.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out that Kentik does solve some of the problems that we've been discussing. From the perspective of correlating diverse data sets, Kentik definitely fits the bill. We take SNMP, NetFlow, flow logs, BGP, synthetic test results, and we pull all this data together, into a bucket and subject it to, various algorithmic analysis so that your teams can leverage that, kind of position for success that I've been talking about. To find the root causes and fix them fast. And we're the only network intelligence platform that I'm aware of that takes in all of this data that I mentioned and also collects the cloud flow logs and the cloud metadata. And we do this for a few reasons. First, we want to make it easier for you to correlate those flow records, the traffic details with the parts of your cloud environments that you care about. So for example, we will associate a flow record from a specific VM at a specific point in time with that VM subnets, VPCs, regions, security zones, policies, and then we marry that with metadata about your on-prem infrastructure to make it really easy to find traffic that's flowing in between these different elements. All of these things are components of a vision that's really emerged in the Kentik product over the last few quarters, and we refer to that as our container to cloud strategy. This vision, it sort of incorporates container level visibility down into the Kubernetes and Docker environments and managed K8s environments like EKS, GKS, or AKS, as well as the more on-prem homegrown, K8s clusters that I mentioned. You use like a super lightweight agent that can be deployed in seconds. We've also recently added a brand new feature called the hybrid map that you see here on the screen. And it ties all of this data together visually so you can click around and start to understand where your traffic is flowing, through which devices, sites, and regions. And in talking with customers that have adopted that more flat architecture, team organization, what this does is it gives the network folks and the non-network folks, kind of an oriented common place to come and get quick answers to questions that used to honestly be reserved for the super senior engineers, the ones that you want to spend time on engineering and automating your network. You don't want them to be answering, well, how much data did we send to Amazon last week and what path did it take? If you can point and click and find the line that connects your network to Amazon, you can answer that question quickly. So the map puts the architecture, the traffic, and the health side by side, so your teams don't have to go back and forth between all the different tools. And we collect data historically, so you can go back and understand problems that happened, last week, last month, without having to wait for those problems to reoccur. Back to you, Shamus.
All right, cool. So just to wrap up, I'm just giving you guys a mission, should you choose to accept it. One, let's respond to digitization, or be prepared to if it isn't already hitting you. It probably will in the future. Business expectations are going to change for your organization as a network operator, network manager, IT manager, whatever. So just be prepared to respond. Identify new monitoring requirements that might come down the line to, hybrid infrastructure can't be managed with a data center monitoring tool, for instance. I remember talking to a network manager recently who, asked him how he was monitoring the surge in remote users to, make sure that they're having a healthy connection and good user experience. He said the main thing he did was to take the tool that he used to monitor networks in his data center environment and point it at his VPN concentrator, which is a good first step, but not a complete answer to the problem. You're not going to know user experience from managing VPN concentrator capacity. Break out of your silo. Talk to integrate with shared tools and processes with DevOps, application management and support, cloud ops, information security, systems administration, help desk, end user support. You figure out who you need to work with, make sure that you have the ability to participate in and support an end-to-end cross-domain operation as digital services become more critical to your business. And as you're doing that, consolidate your tools where possible. Don't rely on the human middleware. Those engineers that know how to do it all in their head aren't going to be there forever and aren't going to have the capacity to support everything that happens. So you need to consolidate your tools, integrate, correlate and analyze data in larger pools. Use tools that have the capacity and flexibility to consume lots of data and analyze it in a meaningful way for you.
Thank you, Shamus and Dan. We can open it up to questions. So we did have a few come in. The first one is, what kind of cloud visibility should I look for in a network monitoring tool?
I'll start with that one, and Daniel might have some opinions on that as well. I mean, we covered it already. Cloud flow logs, whether it's AWS VPC logs or something else, that can give you a lot of good broad visibility if your network monitoring tool can consume that. It's going to depend a lot on your priorities and the tools you have. You may want to get some kind of packet data insight in your cloud environments, and so maybe you want to leverage some of the new tapping capabilities that providers like AWS have put out there. Deploy some probes in the cloud if you have to. That can get complex, so you probably want to prioritize certain applications and services with that. But yeah, the VPC flow logs, the cloud flow logs are a good starting point. But Dan, do you have any other opinions on that?
Yeah, I would second your assertion that cloud flow logs are a good starting point. And I would just say it really depends on the problems you're trying to solve, and the importance of your cloud environment. If you're just doing some development in the cloud and it's a really private lockdown, environment, and then you migrate that app and run it out of a production data center, well, then how you spend on monitoring that environment will differ dramatically than if you're running your production services out of that. Also, how large of an environment are you going to spin up, right? If you need to put agents on five VMs, gosh, I'm showing my age, versus 50,000, your approach is going to be very, very different. So scaling, your use case and the import of the cloud itself, I think all play into that decision.
Great.
Great. So we have one more question. Is security part of hybrid monitoring?
Yeah, I think so. There are a couple of different ways to look at that, but one thing I want to say is that we're finding that network operations teams are collaborating a lot more with their security counterparts, and network operations monitoring and management tools are really essential to supporting that. A lot of network operations tools are able to either directly or indirectly provide some security related insight and can help you the research. Earlier in the presentation, I showed that security issues are often a root cause of complex service problems. So a lot of times a network operations team is troubleshooting a performance issue or a network outage like it's just a performance issue or a network outage. And the deeper they go, the sooner or later they realize that it's actually a security incident, a breach, an attack. If they had some security related insights in their network operations platform, they might be able to do that mean time to insight more quickly. And also if they're working more collaboratively with security personnel in a cross-domain team, they can be more proactive in situations like that.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's absolutely part and parcel in hybrid monitoring. As a necessity as part of hybrid is that you're going to move something from some place to another place. And when you do that, often you have to, change the way that you protect that. It might be moving from an appliance-based firewall to a host-based firewall, or moving from an appliance-based firewall to, security policies implemented at a VPC or a subnet. And so there's the hybrid migration aspect of security. And then there's, of course, the compliance and audit. Literally right before I got on this call, I was talking with another customer who mentioned that they did a lot of their development in the cloud, kind of that, develop in the cloud, run out of the data center model. And was surprised to find out that many of their developers were spinning up new VPCs and private accounts and attaching, internet gateways directly to those without any kind of security policies whatsoever. And so all day long, this application that's under development is getting scanned by, outside, malicious attackers. And then that calls into question, how secure that software, once it's finally migrated onto the production environment, truly is. So to me, it's absolutely necessary. It's defense in depth to have that security posture, from day one, especially since it's so easy to turn on. And then if you can, or if you're lucky enough to get that kind of collaboration where the security teams and the network teams are working together and looking at that same tool set, then incidents that, like Shamus was mentioning, can be resolved so much faster.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you to today's speakers and to our audience. If there are additional questions or if you'd like more information, you can find us at Kentik.com or email us at info@Kentik.com. The recorded version of today's presentation will be available following the event. Please look for an email from the Kentik team to re-watch and share the presentation. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.